For over a century, the Springboks dominated world rugby with the All Blacks, and it was always a hot debate over who the true champions of the world were. Unfortunately, politics and sport could not be separated, and during the 1970s and 80s there was more and more pressure from the international community for all sports governing bodies to cut ties with South Africa on all sporting grounds. Some unions tried their best to keep sporting contact with South Africa, most notably New Zealand. With limited international rugby being played during the 1980s, the Currie Cup became the pinnacle of South African rugby, and in all honesty, it probably gave the South African rugby fraternity a skewed view on how strong our rugby was during isolation. In 1990, the political landscape was changing in South Africa, and in 1991, the national cricket team went on their first official tour to India. Rugby would soon follow, and on 23 March 1992, the South African Rugby Football Union was officially formed under the leadership of Dr. Danie Craven. This is the story behind South Africa's return to international rugby. The 1992 domestic season was well underway, but the opportunity to play international rugby was there and tests had to be organised. 5 tests were announced, first against the All Blacks and Wallabies in South Africa, before the Boks would embark on a tour of France and England at the end of the season. There was renewed optimism and excitement in South Africa, and rugby fever was running high in anticipation of seeing an official Springbok team on the field again. The reality is that South Africa had lost some significant ground during isolation, and the players, provincial teams and administration was more amateur than other countries. John Williams was appointed as Springbok coach, but amazingly, he only found out about the appointment from a third party months after it was decided. It's crazy if you think about it. Ex-Springbok captain AB Milan was appointed as team manager, and together with Williams, they had to quickly identify the best Springbok team they could put up against the best teams in the world. On 21 July 1992, the Springbok selectors held official trials at Loftus Versfeld. Initially, Williams was set on his team, and although he had a good mix of experienced players and youngsters, he left out Danie Gerber, the Springbok legend from the 1980s. Gerber was 34 at the time and played wing for Western Province, but played well in the trials. Williams' choice for his centre pairing was going to be Pieter Muller and Brendan Venter. But in a cruel twist of fate, Venter, who was the in-form centre in South Africa, broke his leg in a freak accident during Free State's match with the All Blacks in Bloemfontein. He was carried off the field, and that ended his Springbok dream, but it opened the door for Danie Gerber. Gerber took the opportunity, and over the next couple of weeks he played superbly for Western Province in the Currie Cup, and by the time the first test came around, he couldn't be left out of the side. The day arrived, 15 August 1992. The venue, Ellis Park, for decades a fortress for the Springboks. Naas Botha, the mercurial genius of South African rugby, was named as captain of the side. Other international veterans included Uli Schmidt, Adolf Malan, Val Baartman, Jannie Breed, and that man Danie Gerber. The atmosphere at Ellis Park was electric, and the national anthem was sung with so much power and emotion that it would have unsettled any international team. Die Stem was still the national anthem of South Africa, but there was an expectation that either Nkosi Sikelele or no anthem be played before the match. To everyone's astonishment, the entire crowd started singing the national anthem before the test, whether politicians wanted it or not. You could see some of the Springbok players didn't quite know how to act, but most of them proudly sang the anthem. The Springboks started with a bang, but their lack of preparation showed as the All Blacks soon took control of the game. But passion for the jersey and national pride carried the Springboks. Danie Gerber played one of his best tests for the Springboks and scored 2 fantastic tries in the second half.
He has terrific pace. Danie Gerber, he loves this corner. A beautiful dummy by him. He did it against England twice. He's done it again.
Robert de Pre, naast Botha, verander weer van rigting na die diskant toe. Deur de Pre, Pieter Muller, en die ander van Danie Gerber en die kom sy tweede drie.
After a late rally, the game ended 27-24 in the All Blacks' favour. If you take into account that the All Blacks had already played the Irish, the World 15 and Australia before this test, the result actually wasn't that bad. However, it was abundantly clear that South African rugby was off the pace in how the game had evolved, how they trained and how they approached the game in general. The talent was there, but South Africa had failed to progress their game during isolation. 7 days later, the Boks would face the newly crowned world champions Australia at a wet and miserable Newlands. Victory for Australia would mean the Wallabies had accomplished everything they could achieve. Defeat would risk their reputation as the best team in the world. Australia would do just that. They proved to the world who the best team was. Although the score was only 8-3 in favour of the Aussies 10 minutes before full time, they closed out the game by scoring 2 late tries by David Campese and Paul Carrazza and put the seal on an emphatic 26-3 victory. The truth is, the Springboks were never in the game and never took control in the bad weather conditions, and the Boks were handed their biggest defeat at that stage of their history. In hindsight, many felt that the Springboks should have played easier opposition like Italy or Wales before taking on the likes of New Zealand and Australia. Hindsight is 2020, and one can understand the eagerness for the Boks to take on their greatest foes. The Springboks embarked on a long tour of France and England at the end of the 1992 season, and they had their work cut out for them. One of the biggest challenges that John Williams and Naas Botha had to deal with was the visible provincialism within the side. For decades, all South African players had was the Currie Cup and competition against each other. Captain Botha wasn't always the most popular player in South Africa, and now suddenly he had to lead his team to victory while most of his teammates wanted to kill him on the field every week. Another challenge was how the Springboks were received and hosted, especially by the French. The truth is that there was a lot of effort put behind disrupting the Springboks' preparation for all their games. Games were arranged against invitational and representative sides who were pretty much national teams or as close as the French could get. Every match was tough and uncompromising. On top of that, there were times that Captain Botha and manager AB Milan had to change training venues and hotels because of the conditions of the facilities that were provided to them. At one training session before the first test, John Williams wanted to focus on scrumming, just to find that the scrum machine they were supposed to use was moved to another field. Naas Botha was adamant that although the conditions weren't ideal, each player on tour contributed to the tour and everyone gave their 100%. No one gave the Springboks a realistic chance of winning the first test in Lyon, but they did just that. Tries by James Small and Danie Gerber sealed the famous 2015 victory for the Springboks. The confidence was back in the team, and now they backed themselves for a famous series win in France.
Up in the tackle and lays the ball back, but Richter gets a boot through for South Africa, and Gerber is there. Danie Gerber has scored another try for South Africa. On the stroke of half-time, Danie Gerber scores. South African scrum, controlled at the back by Strauss. Dink through by Garth Wright. The try has been given. James Small, happy to touch down there. The young winger, beautiful kick through from Garth Wright.
In the second test, the French brought the Springboks back to earth with a commanding display. After a poor kicking performance by the French wing Sebastien Villa in the first test, the kicking duties went to French centre Thierry Lacroix, who kept the scoreboard ticking while fly-off Alain Pinot scored a try in the corner to seal the Springboks' fate in Paris.
Coming up right from the fullback position, Hubert again now. Pinot, can he get over for his third try? Yes, he does it. 3 tries to the French fly half. Got past all the South African defence, elusive running, about 3 tackles he got by.
On to England, where the Springboks showed better form and beat a very strong England B side before the test against England. Jacques Willefeer scored one of the greatest tries ever by a Springbok and showed his class early in his career.
A winning tour in Romania, now perhaps in sight of their greatest day, their first ever B victory over a Southern Hemisphere team. But Olivier has other ideas. Gerber, Olivier, the 1-2 in the corner. What a fabulous score. That's how they come back.
The Springboks believed they could beat the current Five Nations champions at Twickenham, and at half-time it looked like it was going to happen when the Boks led 16-11 after a Tiaan Strauss try and the customary drop goal from Naas Botha. The second half was a different story, and England ran away with the match with tries from Tony Underwood, Dewey Morris, Will Carling and Jeremy Guscott, sealing a 33-16 victory for the English. Naas Botha retired after the match, and it was also the last test match the great Danie Gerber would play for South Africa. The 1992 international season was not a successful one, but it was never going to be. What it did do was exploit the shortcomings in South African rugby, and the Springboks game would continue to improve over the next couple of years under Ian McIntosh and later under the great Kitch Christie. What is certain is that although results weren't in South Africa's favour, the team of 1992 did at times play enterprising rugby, and each player played their own part in laying the foundations for what would happen on 24 June 1995 when Francois Pienaar lifted the Webb Ellis Cup in front of 43 million South Africans.